All right, hi, welcome to week 4 of Educational Processes and Family and Consumer Sciences Professions. Hopefully by now you have learned a few things and you are ready for another exciting week of learning about how people learn. So this week we are actually going to talk about how adults learn, the kind of environments that they need to be in order to learn, and kind of how we can help them with those things. So as I have said many, many, many times, this week, I am actually leaving. I don't know that I've actually told you guys where I'm going. So I'm going to Ireland for a conference. It's called the International Federation of Home Economics Conference. And we will be there we're leaving on the 20th and we will be back in the States on the 29th. But I will be in Seattle and working at a conference there. Some of you may know that conference a little bit better if you were in FCCLA, which is the Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America. When you were in middle school or high school, we are actually going to be at the national conference exhibiting right after we get back from Ireland. So I'm flying straight from Ireland to that conference. So just so we know, I will be available to answer questions, but not as quickly as some of you have come to expect over the last few weeks. So if you have questions, please send them to me as soon as possible so that I can answer them in an appropriate time manner and not while I am dead asleep in the middle of the night. So thank you very much. And I am excited to have you guys along on this journey with me. I'll post some pictures as we go along across the next few weeks, and you guys will see a little bit more about what I do on a regular basis during the summer. So this week, like I said, we're going to talk about how adults learn and what they need to learn well, if that makes sense. There's a couple of assignments that you have that are due this upcoming Sunday on the 23rd. Your learner and educator paper is due. And then we're going to talk about a needs assessment. So we'll talk about that in just a minute at the very end of this PowerPoint to kind of help you think through what it is that our learners or your learners need. So let's talk about chapter 1 and 2 of our Caffarella book. If you don't have it, let me know, and I think I have some scanned chapters just in case. So when we talk about planning adult programs, one of the first things we have to do is think about what adult programs look like. They come in all shapes and formats. They can be formal and informal, and they can be either long or short. So when we think about different things that we've done recently, the learning programs that we've been to, that could be everything from your formal classes in a university setting to a 1-hour program that you go to learn something new. So some things that I like to think about that we may use as a learning program are a pottery class, something that you may love to do and want to learn to do better. Anything in that vein is actually a learning program. So it can come in all kinds of formats. Like I said, they can be big, they can be small. Conferences are a great adult learning program. Hopefully you take some things away from some of those professional conferences that you go to over time. And they are a great way for adults to learn things. Generally, that's because we have to do some kind of continuing education. And that is our more formal format in terms of thinking through how people learn. So they can also be short or long. No, long or short time frame. So think about things. It could be 1 hour. It could be one whole day, or it could be a series of lessons over a series of weeks that we actually go to maybe once a week on Tuesdays in order to learn some new things. So adult programs, like I said, are anything that consists of adults learning something. So the primary purposes of adult education, there's actually 5 of them, and a lot of programs serve many, many, many purposes. So the first is encouraging continuous growth and development of individuals. So we think about things that we learn where we want to grow. Maybe that is even religiously speaking. Maybe we want to grow in some way, we want to grow in our mental health, and we have that encouragement through adult education programs. Also, assisting people in responding to practical problems and issues of adult life. So think about things that you need to learn about that you may not fully know how to do. I think about things like car maintenance. There are adult learning programs in how to do car maintenance. There are adult learning programs in how to do your taxes. So those things, those practical problems, are great for adult learning programs. We also prepare people for current and future work opportunities. That's where a lot of that continuing education comes in, which most of us have to do throughout our professional lives. The next is assisting organizations in achieving desired results and adapting to change. So hopefully our organizations are good at changing. And sometimes we need that adult education to adapt to that change. And the last one is providing opportunities to examine community and societal issues and foster change for the common good and promote a civil society. So we need those adult learning programs maybe to examine some things that are going on in our community and help us move forward in making our communities better. So when we think about calling for change, we actually think about 3 different kinds of change. We think about individual, organizational, and community and societal. So the first of those, individual, is bringing in that new knowledge, building our skills, and the examination of personal values and beliefs. So that is our individual change, changing things inside of us that we want to make better. This could also be physical changes. So maybe you go to an adult learning program to learn how to do some kind of physical activity or exercise better. That can also be individual change. Our organizational change focuses more on those policies and procedures and ways of working that may need to change over time. So a lot of times, especially in higher ed, we have adult learning programs on things like how to better teach our students using artificial intelligence or how to navigate artificial intelligence. So that's how we kind of think through that organizational change and the policies and procedures. And that third kind of change is community and societal change, where we think about our different segments of society and how they respond to the world around them. So these may be things like learning more about the civil rights movement in order to further those causes, or learning about the women's rights movement and helping to continue to further those causes. Now, these are things that we need to change. Sometimes they're big picture and sometimes they're really little picture, but they're things that need to change kind of overall and how we make the world a better place. So we have 3 different approaches to program planning. And I know at this point you're like, what program are you talking about, Dr. Holland? So at the end of this class, you are actually going to have created a learning program and implemented that learning program with some friends. So, or people around you who need to learn something. So we have 3 different approaches to learning programs. The first is our traditional, which is a stepwise progression that moves logically through that planning process. We say, okay, this is what we need. This is where we need to get to. How do we step by step create solutions to our problem? There's likely little room for flexibility within that process, and our objectives match our program outcomes during that time. So we have pragmatic or practical at the same time, and we consider the changing conditions around us in order to create that program plan. So we have more flexibility in this pragmatic or practical process, and it is common when addressing those very tough issues. Some of those things can be really hard to talk about, which leads us to our radical program planning. This is more concept-based and idea-based than anything else. This is creating a deep understanding of things and what we want to change and then trying to change that. So think about some social movements that you've seen and heard of where that change gradually occurs over time. It's not necessarily something that happens right away, because not all change is a really right away kind of thing. So those things like the civil rights movement, like we talked about before, or the women's rights movements, those are things that have taken time to develop and to create that actual awareness of the social change. So that's kind of on the radical program planning side. We are going to stick more in the traditional and the pragmatic or practical approach to program planning, where we are thinking through step by step how we're going to plan a program that is beneficial for other people, and then we are going to implement that program. All right, so one of the things that we want to think about is how our program is going to help fill a need. So we have all of our learners have needs. You guys have needs in this class. You either have, generally speaking, this is a class that is on your degree plan, so you have the need to take the class. But hopefully you learn some things during this class. So how is our program, that program that you're going to create, going to fill one of those needs? Like I said, your assignment for this upcoming couple weeks is to write a needs assessment and actually implement that needs assessment. So there is much more information in your assignments category where you can look, and what you're going to do is you're going to survey 5 to 10 people, minimum 5, and ask them about their learning needs. So what do they like to learn? What do they not like to learn? And the environment in which they like to learn those things. So you're going to create that needs assessment in order to understand how a program will help fill the needs of your learners. Hopefully that made sense. So moving on to chapter 2 of our book, we're going to talk about the interactive model of program planning. So this is a guide for program planners that helps the program process be more interactive and less linear. So we're thinking about all of the different kinds of things that people need in order to learn effectively. So the major difference between this and a lot of other models is that there is not a real beginning or end. You can kind of plug in anywhere and get your desired outcome. So there's a process of planning, and it is a people process. So what that means is that we are focusing on what people need and how they learn in order to create that effective learning program. It allows for our planners to take into account the cultural aspects of their learners. So think about if you're teaching nutrition. This is one that I always think about. If you're teaching nutrition to low-income learners, how do we create a nutrition program that is helpful for them and doesn't just that is helpful for them? Let's think about that. How to create a nutrition learning program where if you are low income, you are not going to feel like you're spending too much money on food and sacrificing other things. That makes sense, right? Okay, so the planners take into account that cultural aspect. Think again, if we're thinking through planning a nutrition program, there are very different cultural foods that people may eat across the span of even Lubbock. So when we think about those cultural aspects and we think about creating a nutrition learning program, what would we have to take into consideration in order to make sure that everyone's needs are being met? Right? Okay, so planners find the model to be a practical and useful tool when we are thinking through these things. So we have a few assumptions that we're going to talk about when using this interactive model of program planning. The first assumption is, what are the participants actually going to learn? We have to focus on change and emergency planning. We have done over the last few years a lot of emergency planning. And we want to get out of the habit of planning for emergencies. So how will this learning result in change? Participants, we want to change participants, organizations, and societal issues as a whole. So like on that slide, a couple slides ago, we talked about the 3 different kinds of change. How are we going to change what people think, and so what they do, what their actions are? Going back to our nutrition example, how do we, when we teach people about how to eat healthy, how do we actually change their behavior? And then how do we change the behavior of organizations? So how do we change the behavior of McDonald's and what they are feeding people on a regular basis? Much bigger question there. So the second assumption we have is we want to realize that it is a smaller world with more diversity and cultural differences than we have ever had before. We see a lot of diversity because of where we live, the university campus, and the invention of social media. We are more connected than ever to the outside world. So people who plan programs for adult learners need to be sensitive to those cultural differences in many forms. So that could be their gender, their race, their ethnicity, which are 2 different things, their class or socioeconomic status. I do not like to call it class because people can have lots of money and no class. So it is their socioeconomic status, their linguistic background, their communication styles, religious affiliations. All of those things need to be taken into consideration when creating an effective learning program. So those cultural differences are really important because, again, going back to our nutrition example, we need to make sure that we are teaching people in a way that is going to be helpful for them. All right. Okay. So the third assumption is we want to consider the power dynamics and interests of our learners. So our final program should be a negotiated product between our learners, the people who are in charge of the programs, and ourselves when we are creating these programs. So we want to make sure that the people who are in charge of creating the programs understand why it's important. We want to also understand or make sure that the people who are coming to the programs understand why it's important, and we need to be in that power dynamic as well. So we have to think about blending of interests of those involved in the planning process, what is important for everyone, and how we can best teach those learners. The planner has the power to ensure that those who should be heard become part of that planning process. So we talk about a lot about stakeholders when we are working through different organizational structures. We have stakeholders. There are stakeholders at the university. Students are part of the stakeholder process at the university level. Also, faculty are stakeholders. The community members outside who live far away or in the town, also stakeholders. So we have to think about that power, and our planners, you guys who are going to be planning these programs, have the power to ensure that those who should be heard become part of that process. All right, moving on to assumption 4. There is no right way to plan a program. None. You can do it however you want, as long as we get our intended results where someone is learning something. A good program planner should be able to bring together diverse planners and pieces to make a harmonious program. And then every planner should practice this skill to ensure that they are evaluating and growing a program planner. As a program planner, sorry. So we want to make sure we are continuously evaluating the results of our programs to make sure that we are doing the best for everyone who is involved. So assumption 5 is creating awareness about the wicked or challenging global problems. You guys are going to learn more about all of this while you're reading these chapters. Just wanted to make sure you heard my voice this week. So we have to acknowledge various factors come into play. So there are always things happening that create some tension in program planning, whether that is not having enough finances or whether it's someone who may not want you to teach the things exactly the way you want to. So when we find those, we have to be willing to address the issues of right and wrong and work through those complex topics. And then we have to take into account the program context, the political situation, social justice problems, and the array of issues facing adults. And it's not as simple as saying, okay, well, we're only going to cater to these specific adults, because these specific adults may not be the only ones who come to those learning programs. We have to think broader and all of the complexities of adults and their prior learning. Okay, so those are our 5 assumptions that we have to kind of think through when we are planning programs. So we have to apply what we know about adult learners. So adult learners, there is a body of thinking, and it is called andragogy. When you are talking about children learners, we call it pedagogy, like a pediatrician, it's pedagogy. Andragogy is the adult version of that. So we have to think about them as very different people than our middle school, high school, younger learners. So the first thing is, in andragogy, learning is just a vessel of change. A lot of times adults learn things because they need to know them right now. Like, when do we learn how to do our taxes? We learn how to do our taxes once we need to know how to do our taxes. We don't learn how to do that beforehand. We learn about it when we need to know it. When do we learn how to change a tire? Hopefully before you need it, but sometimes we learn about it in that moment when we need it. So we also have to think about our behaviors, skills, values, and beliefs, and how that all plays into what an adult can and will learn. Sometimes, because adults have different beliefs, they will come with preconceived notions of what is going to be taught in your lessons or in your classes. Maybe they have some preconceived notions about who you are as a person, or they have preconceived notions about Texas Tech University because of everything they've heard. So we have to take all of that into consideration as we are working with adult learners. Adults, and I think you guys know this very well, we learn best by doing things. We do not learn best by just sitting and listening. So I apologize, but read the book. So we also have to assume positive intent, not negative intent. What that means is we have to assume that people are coming with their best selves, wanting to learn something, and not necessarily that they're just coming to make fun of you or to just be there. Okay, all right, so there's 14 components of the model. And I forget what page this is on in your textbook, but it looks like a little flower, pretty close to the beginning. I think it's in chapter 2. So we have administrative tasks and then our learning components to go along with that. So we have things like preparing and managing budgets, organizing our marketing plans, hiring and managing staff, determining the format, setting schedule, all the details, and negotiating agreements, and then the learning components. So all of that is kind of the stuff that we do to make sure everything runs smoothly. Those administrative tasks. Our learning components, we talk about discerning the context for planning. So what is our context? In terms of our societal context, we create an evaluation plan to make sure that we're actually teaching what we want to teach. We're devising transfer of learning plans. So we've learned something, or we've taught someone else something, how do we actually use that in the real world? We're also designing instruction, constructing program goals and objectives, identifying and prioritizing program ideas and needs, and then building a solid base of support. So these are kind of out of order, but you can see how our administrative tasks actually lean on those learning components to make sure that we are creating really good learning programs for our students. So that's the end of the PowerPoint. Yay, go us. So, like I said, this week, your task, I think it's due June 30th. So you're gonna have 2 weeks to do this. Your task is to do a needs assessment with at least 5 people in and around you. You're going to ask them a few questions. You can ask those questions however you want. I usually suggest a Google form so that you can just email it to them or text it to them and have them fill it out. And then you have those answers. And then you're going to write a little essay about your answers, how you would evaluate them, and then not how you evaluate them, what you've learned from those answers, and then also how you're going to use those to create a learning program for someone in your life, or not in your life, just a general learning program. Okay, so that is it for this week. We did it in under 30 minutes, so go us. Yes. And hopefully we will get these done a little bit quicker from now on. All right. So I hope you guys have a wonderful week whenever you watch this. If you have questions about your essay, your learner and educator essay that you're supposed to be writing, please ask them before the 20th, or realize that I will be traveling and I might not get back to you as quickly as I have. So just keep that in mind as you are going through the materials and the assignments for this week. All right. Have a great week, and we will talk to you again in the next module. Bye.